Back in 2012, Seedrs was named one of East London's 20 hottest startups by The Guardian, attracting $3.5 million US funding for its own platform. The London-based startup is the world's first fully regulated equity crowdfunding platform. Our next speaker is the CEO and co-founder of Seedrs. Please welcome Jeff LYNN.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Jeff LYNN. I am CEO and co-founder of Seedrs. We are an equity crowdfunding platform, and I want to talk today, just for a few minutes, about equity crowdfunding, about what it does for startups, not only in terms of helping them raise money, but also in terms of the other value you get, and hence why we see equity crowdfunding as the ultimate smart money. I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Seedrs first. I've promised the organizers I won't make this a sales pitch, but I'm going to give you a little bit of background about us. But I'm then going to talk a little bit more about the crowd, who they are, what they do, and how raising investment from them can work, and how it all interacts with traditional venture capital. So just to say a couple words about us, we are, very simply, a platform for investing in startups and early stage businesses. We let investors invest from £10, €10, up to as much as the startup or business is seeking. And we let entrepreneurs raise money from a combination of friends, family, angels, institutions, and the crowds. And we do it all through a digitized, standardized, and highly simplified process. We are based in London and Lisbon. We are open all across Europe. Sadly, we are not in Turkey quite yet, but we hope to be soon. We've done a number of kind of cool things, I think, since we launched a little over 2 years ago. As said in the introduction, we were the first regulated equity crowdfunding platform in the world. It took us 3 years from inception to full regulation. It added to my blood pressure and age significantly. I'm actually only 19 years old. But we made it through, and ever since launching in July of 2012, we've managed to do a lot of things. In addition to being open to a wide range of businesses, we're now funding nearly €2 million a month. We did about €7 million of funding in September. We're doing about 10 deals a month at this point. We've also branched out into doing funds, so entire accelerator cohorts have funded through us, giving people the opportunity to invest across an entire class. We've done convertible equity campaigns, allowing businesses on their way to Series A rounds to raise convertibles before doing so. And we've done a heck of a lot else. And as I say, I promise not to make this a sales pitch, but a few stats about us. And if you have any specific questions about Seedrs, I'll be around afterwards and would love to talk to you. So who are the crowd? Who is investing through us? And this is, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to equity crowdfunding. I think rewards-based crowdfunding, the Kickstarters and Indiegogos of the world, there's a pretty strong understanding of the crowd as being this wide community of purchasers and supporters. But there's often a lack of understanding, I think, around who participates in equity crowdfunding. And the best way, I think, to explain it is to think about who invests in startups in the traditional offline angel sort of way, and who else is out there in the world that has capital. Angels are a very, very limited group of people. They're generally people in roughly the top 1%, if not half of 1% of the population by wealth. In order to invest offline, you're talking about investing 10,000, often 25,000 euros or more. And to do that deal after deal across a wide portfolio as part of a broader portfolio takes a heck of a lot of money. It also takes time. It also requires a level of interest and dedication that means going to pitching events, engaging in due diligence, doing a whole lot of work day in and day out. And what you tend to find is there are some absolutely fabulous, fantastic angels out there who are totally dedicated to it, but it's a very, very small proportion of the overall capital pool. In most developed societies, investable capital, capital that can be invested for growth, tends to be held by roughly the top 20% of the population. So you have this whole 2 to 20% kind of mass affluent who are shut out of early stage investing. And these tend to be young professionals, small business owners, middle managers, academics, civil servants, people in jobs that are slightly less well remunerated, but nonetheless have a lot to add and have a lot of interest in the early stage ecosystem. And you also have high net worths who are too busy. You have people who are high net worth because they work 16 hours a day at a bank or at a law firm. They don't particularly feel like going to a pitching event on a Tuesday afternoon, but they're still really interested in being part of the space generally. And when you put all these people together, this is a really, really interesting crowd of people. And what we tend to see in the deals that we fund and some of our peer platforms see the same, is that you wind up with this mix of managing directors of major banks, partners of law firms, partners of top accountancy firms, people who own their own businesses, people who've been successful in academia and the creative arts, in government. One of our first and most active investors on Seedrs is the British ambassador to an African country. I think he sits in his country, which I won't identify, where I don't know how much is going on, but this keeps him interested and occupied and engaged in the European startup scene. So you get an amazing crowd of people supporting you and with a vested interest in your success. And that has value. You know, life is a full contact sport, and nowhere is that more true than when it comes to building a business. It is fantastic to have a few top-notch VCs or angels here. I see Max sitting in the front row. If you can get Max into your company, please do so. But it's also fantastic, on top of that, to have an amazing group of people from a wide range of disciplines and a wide range of backgrounds who can add value for you. These are your beta testers, they're your mavens, they're your early adopters. They're the people who, when you say, does anybody have a contact in e-commerce in Warsaw? 3 people stick up their hands and say, actually, I do. So it's a very, very powerful group. And then, as you get even deeper into the crowd, you'll often find that there are a couple of more traditional angels sitting in there who may want to come and take a more active role, and who you may want to take a more active role. But even if they don't exist, the core power of equity crowdfunding, and I think the thesis of what I really want to get across today, is that having a crowd of educated, intelligent, successful people, even if they're non-traditional investors, has a tremendous amount of value for early stage business. And our vision and our dream is to help bring, as businesses are born and grow, is to help all of them build this kind of community around them. The flip side of all of this is that you have to get the deal structure right, because as wonderful as it is to have a few hundred, passionate advocates in your deal, if all of them are party to your subscription agreement, if all of them are signing consents, if all of them are doing things, you're going to screw your company. It's going to be impossible to raise additional capital. It's going to be impossible to sell when it comes down the road. And one of the main differentiations among different equity crowdfunding platforms in the market is how they solve this problem. Our goal, and what we have done from inception, is to ensure that this doesn't become a problem. So what we do at Seedrs is we act as nominee on behalf of all the underlying investors. We're the sole legal shareholder, we're the party to all contracts. And so when you do go on and raise that VC round or get yourself bought by Google, you only come to us for the signature you need for any other things that you need from an administrative perspective. We see this as vital, we see this as a really important way of doing things. And it's also really important for investors because it allows us to enforce core investor protections on behalf of all these small investors who might not otherwise be able to have them. So my advice and plea for those interested in the equity crowdfunding space is to look beyond just the volume of investment, to look beyond the hype, although all of that's very important, and also look into the knitting and look at how platforms structure their deals and how you deal with the fact that you have a few hundred investors in place. The final broad thing I want to talk about, and then I'm just going to finish off with a couple of quick case studies, is how what we do interacts with traditional venture capital. And the high level of it is it should interact very well. Raising capital is all about an equity ladder. It's all about raising different types of capital at different points in your growth. And again, if your deals are structured properly, which is a big focus for us, it should be absolutely no challenge at all for you to be able to raise crowd money and angel money and VC all in succession, or all even intertwined. We're starting to see businesses raise capital through us in a mix of VC and crowd rounds, all sort of jumbled up. It's not something we expected when we first launched, but we're finding that there's been tremendous appetite for crowd money to come in at all different stages. And so it works together well. We are not out there to displace venture capital. We are not out there by any means to remove it from the picture. It still has a huge amount of value. And done right, crowdfunding can work very well with VC. The other side of the equation, though, is that it will put bad VCs out of business. There are fundamentally, and for those of you familiar with portfolio theory and with investment generally, there are two ways of making returns in any asset class. There's beta, which is sort of the asset class-wide return, and then there's alpha, which is the talent that the individual investor layers on top of the market. We bring beta. We bring exposure as widely as possible to the investment, to startups and early stage businesses as an asset class. If as a VC, and there are plenty of third-tier VCs out there, if as a VC, your sole value proposition was that you had proprietary access to deals that nobody else had, and that's how you were making returns, we are bad news for you. If your value proposition is that you're good at picking growth businesses, investing in them, and helping them grow, we are simply a facilitator. We are simply there to potentially increase your deal flow and potentially not even get involved with your deal flow. And so it is a very, very important distinction, I think, and one that I think is just beginning to be appreciated within the equity crowdfunding world, that while we are not intended to be competitive to VCs, while our goal is to do something very different than traditional venture capital, it is additive to the good VCs and detractive from the bad ones. So I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of quick case studies about what we've done, the kinds of businesses that have funded through us, and our work. And as I say, I'll be around afterwards to answer any questions. So just to give a sense of our sorts of businesses, one of the first businesses we funded was a company called Future Ad Labs. They're a fantastic ad tech play based out of London. They raised £60,000 through us, very, very early seed, just to build out an MVP. They were so successful with their MVP, they went on and raised a round from Passion Capital and Balderton. They then came back to us to raise a convertible in advance of their forthcoming A round, and they are growing very, very quickly. This is one of those businesses that looks like it can become a superstar exit for the investors who are involved. This is a traditional tech, high-growth business. Another example similar is Satega. Stephen Renwick is a fantastic entrepreneur, ex-Rocket Internet, started working on a business in Berlin, has since moved to London in the financial services space. Again, a small ticket, about £30,000, build out a minimum viable product, use that capital to grow significantly, went on to win Seed Camp, went on after that to raise a venture round from BDMI, the venture arm of Bertelsmann, and again is a traditional high growth, hugely successful or potentially hugely successful business. But maybe most interesting for our purposes is the other end of the spectrum, which is Mike's Fancy Cheese. Mike is a Northern Irish cheese nerd. He absolutely loves cheese. And after a number of years of working in the dairy industry and working in delicatessens, decided he wanted to make Northern Ireland's first ever blue cheese, or first ever artisanal blue cheese. Raised £80,000 through us, not a traditional venture-backable business, not a traditional high-growth business, but a more conservative, more traditional sort of play, and one that, while lower growth, is also lower risk. And guess what he did? He went out, raised the money, took the capital, bought the equipment he needed, and then started making the cheese. Cheese just came off the line a few months ago, and it is outstanding. If you find yourself in the UK, he's got distribution all over the place. It's called Young Buck. I would suggest you try it if you're a blue cheese fan. And this is, in many ways, just as important a business and just as important a case study in the value of equity crowdfunding as the traditional tech ones. I can see I'm way over time, and that's all I have to say. Thank you very much. I look forward to talking to any of you afterwards. Cheers.